familiar question today. When you think about Thanksgiving, what do you think about? When you think about Thanksgiving, what do you think about? I imagine that some would say off the top of their head, they think about turkey and gravy. I imagine some think about dressing. Now, I've been here for 12 years, but I still don't understand. Is it dressing or stuffing in Georgia? All right, y'all don't know either. I get it. Okay. So maybe you think about dressing or stuffing. Maybe you think about cranberries. I know my father-in-law is a big cranberry fan. He loves that stuff that comes out looking like Jell-O. It's just, but maybe you think about those things. Maybe you think about family. I know we're leaving this week to go visit some family. Maybe you think about that, or maybe you think about family coming into your house, and so it's scramble around, get everything clean, get everything put up, get everything looking like it wouldn't look any other day of the year, but hey, family's coming, so let's clean up. Maybe you think about the fact of football. Maybe you like that. NFL is taking notice. I don't know if you noticed that, but now they have 3 games on Thanksgiving Day, not just 2. And so they're taking into consideration that you're going to watch a 12 o'clock game, a 4 o'clock game, and a 7 o'clock game. So I don't know what you think about when you think about Thanksgiving, but it may not be the fact of what we are thankful for. And even deeper than that, it may not be the fact of who we're thankful to. I believe that one of the problems we have, and I would say in our country as a nation, because of our affluence, because of our wealth, because even the poorest person in America is richer than most of the rest of the world, one of the problems that we struggle with and wrestle with is understanding where it all comes from. And in our country, a lot of us have this mindset that whatever I have, I got, I made it, I earned it, it's mine, I have it, it's mine. And today what I want to do is look into this topic of Thanksgiving, obviously. And I want to talk about not only what are we thankful for, but who we should be thankful to. And I want to encourage you today during this message of hopefully living a thankful life. I do believe that we could be thankful every single day. You don't need a turkey and a football game and a day off from work to be thankful. But so many of us live that way, don't we? So many of us gripe all the other days of the year, but then on Thanksgiving Day we try to be thankful. And so maybe you're that way. I know I'm that way a lot of times where I don't even want to see the positive or the good. I'm going to gripe about the negative. But today I want to talk about living a thankful life. Last week we talked about the word content. And we talked about what it meant to be content, what it meant to understand. And we can't fully understand this. And I think that's always one of our struggles as a believer, is we can't fully understand the answer to every spiritual question. But as a believer, you begin to understand that God sees the whole picture. That the Bible tells us that God has known your first day to your last day. He already knows. And that's hard for us because you and I, at best, can see the next couple of minutes, maybe the next few hours, maybe the end of the month. We can see the end of the month, but God can see everything. And so somebody said it this week at the men's thing, we can't see the forest from the trees. Well, God can see the forest, and He sees the forest. And part of what we can understand as a believer is that in the middle of the forest, while we're in the middle of a situation, while we're in the middle of a struggle, a trial, a temptation, while we're in the middle of a battle, a war that we're facing, that God sees the whole picture. And as a believer, the Bible promises us that we can trust in the fact, just as we sang, that God will work everything for the good of those who love Him and are called by Him. So last week we talked about that, and what was really cool about that is the fact that Paul said, I have learned to live with plenty or with nothing. And when he said that, if you would just go in the New Testament and read the scriptures that he wrote and read his life story throughout the New Testament, you would see that he literally lived in plenty, where he had the best of everything, and he lived with nothing, where he barely even had the clothes on his back. And so when he said that, it comes with some merit. It comes with some credence. It comes with some, he knows what he's talking about because he had lived that. And that's what we talked about last week. And so today we want to talk about what it means to live a thankful life. A thankful life. Now, most of us believe that Thanksgiving began with the Pilgrims, right? At least that's what we're taught, from little bitty ages, and you make little headbands in art class, and you have parties, and you celebrate all the pilgrims that came, and all the Indians that were there, and the great big party that they have. And so most of us think of Thanksgiving as beginning then, but really Thanksgiving began all the way back in the Old Testament. All the way back in the Old Testament. Now, to get the whole story, you would have to go and read the whole book of Exodus. And I'm not going to do that for you today, but I want to take the whole book of Exodus and boil it down in about 3 minutes. That'll be quite a feat, you'll find out. But we're going to boil the whole book of Exodus down in 3 minutes. There's these people named the Israelites. They are God's people. They have been in slavery for over 400 years. Now, in that day, in that culture, and in that time, if you were a slave, you could have easily been abused. You worked hard. You didn't have any personal rights. You couldn't say no. If the master came in, or the king came in, or someone from his court or his family, and whatever they asked of you, you had to do. They said, hey, come here. I want you to go move that pile of rocks over there. You had to do it. You couldn't say, well, why are we moving it over there? Do you think that's really the smart thing to do? And then once you got them moved over there, he could tell you, hey, move them all right back over there. And you had no right to ask a question. You had no right to do anything. So for over 400 years, these Israelites, the nation of Israel, had been in slavery. Earlier, a man named Moses was born. Now, Moses had a very interesting life in the fact that he was born to a Jewish mother. Okay? And so he would have been part of the slavery group. But because his mom feared for his upbringing and feared for his life and all of that, she sent him down this river in a basket. Just so happened the basket bumped up to the coast at Pharaoh's house, the king's house. And so Pharaoh's daughter took him in, and Pharaoh's daughter began to raise him. And so Moses, who should have been a slave for all of these years, was raised in the king's house. And so later in life he realized that and he knew the truth, and so he actually went back to be with the slaves. He left the king's house and went back to the slaves. And God began to use Moses because he did have a unique position as both a Jewish person and as someone who had a voice with Pharaoh, the king. He had a very intricate position. And so God began to take him, and God began to tell him, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to Pharaoh and tell him, God says, let my people go. And Moses uses all sorts of excuses why he can't do it. They won't listen to me. Why are you sending me? Why are you trying to use me? God said, just go do what I'm telling you to go do. And he did. Went to Pharaoh, said, God says, let my people go. And Pharaoh goes, I don't care. No. And then God sends a plague. And so then Moses goes back again and said, God said, let my people go. Pharaoh said no. And so he sends another plague. And there were frogs and flies, and the rivers turned to blood, and all of these different plagues that took place. Every time Moses would go back and say, God says, let my people go, and Pharaoh would say no, God would say, here's another plague. And Pharaoh didn't pay attention to any of the plagues until the very last one. Because the very last plague of the ones that were there was that the firstborn son of every family would be killed. Unless you were of the Jewish family, and they got a special message from God, said, unless you take the blood and put it over your doorpost, and it's a whole big lesson there in that, but unless you do that, when the death angel passes through, the firstborn will be killed. And that included Pharaoh's son. So that got Pharaoh's attention, and Pharaoh called Moses in, and Pharaoh said, fine, get your people, get your stuff, and go. And so they did. They gathered up all their belongings. They took off, headed to where God told them to go. And they're traveling. And then it wasn't long after that, Pharaoh goes, what did I just do? I just got rid of my workforce. I just got rid of the slaves that we had. I got rid of the people who were my servants. Go get them back. Go track them down, capture them again, bring them back to my house. He changed his mind. And so the nation of Israel is going this way, and right behind them is the army of Pharaoh to try to recapture them. And they come up to the Red Sea, and the Red Sea is too deep to cross on foot, and so they literally are standing, their back is against the Red Sea. The army is coming this way. Some of the people even begin to say, why did we even leave it all? We're going to end up right back where we were at, getting the same beatings that we were taking, getting the same harsh work that we were doing. Why did we even leave? That's what some of them said. God took the Red Sea, and you know this story, and He parted the waters. And He gave a route through the Red Sea. The waters parted, and the Israelites crossed over. What's one of the most impressive verses to me in the Bible, it says they crossed over not on muddy land, not on sandy land, they crossed over on dry land. And right as they got to the other side of the sea, and Pharaoh's army was still chasing, and by now they were into the sea. By the time the last Israelite crossed out, the waters closed back in, killed all of Pharaoh's army. And so the people began to travel from there. And they began to travel. They did some interesting things that we still use today. They set up a justice system. You may remember, if you've read it, that Moses was spending a lot of his time being a judge. Somebody would go, well, he took my cow, or they took my sheep, or they did me wrong with this. And they would bring their complaint to Moses, and Moses would hear, and he would say, find in favor of this person or that person. And he got to be so much that he then got other people to be judges. So now they have this whole judicial system. After this is when you're familiar with the Ten Commandments. God gave them the Ten Commandments. And one of the things that God did in the book of Leviticus chapter 3 is He began to set up these offerings and these sacrifices that the people would make. He began to give them instructions on how to build a place of worship where God could reside. He gave them instructions on how to build and offer sacrifices and build the altars and do all of those things. And the book of Leviticus is all of that. In Leviticus chapter 3, He sets up a thanksgiving offering. So it didn't begin with the pilgrims. It actually began in Leviticus chapter 3. And in Leviticus chapter 7, here's what He says about it. He says, if you present your peace offering as an expression of thanksgiving, the usual animal sacrifice must be accompanied by various kinds of bread made without yeast, thin cakes mixed with olive oil, wafers spread with oil, and cakes made of choice flour mixed with the olive oil. The peace offering of thanksgiving must also be accompanied by loaves of bread made with yeast. One of each kind of bread must be presented at the gifts of the Lord. Now here's what's really interesting about this. Most of the sacrifices and offerings that God set up revolved around harvest time. That was when you would, could bring part of the first fruit of your harvest. That's when you could bring the tithe of your sheep. If you had 10 sheep, you brought one, and all those things. Now here's what's interesting. The peace offering, the thanksgiving offering, could be made at any time of the year. It could be made as often as you wanted to do it. So literally, if you were just a really thankful person, you could go every day to the temple and offer this thanksgiving offering to God. But what happened in that day, which is what happens with most of us today, most people would save up that offering until they went to make another offering, or until they went to make their sin offering or their other things. I mean, most of them just saved it up. Instead of going every day and just being thankful to God like that, they just said, no, we'll just wait. We're going in 3 weeks. We'll just do it then. See, that's what happens to a lot of us today. We can be thankful every single day of the year. There's nothing that prevents us of being thankful. And yet most of us save it up until the fourth Thursday of November. Most of us save it up till these next few days, and we'll actually think about being thankful, and we'll actually express being thankful. We may even go up to people that we know and love and say, we're thankful for you. We're thankful for this. We may even go to God and say, God, I'm thankful for my family or my friends or my church or whatever it is. But we can be thankful every single day of the year. There's nothing that prevents us from being thankful. And again, you don't need a day off, a turkey, and a football to be thankful. There's a lot of verses in Psalms that have to do with Thanksgiving. But there's only one chapter in Psalms that is actually called a praise of thanksgiving, a psalm of thanksgiving, and that is Psalm 100. And we're going to dive into Psalm 100 just for a few minutes. You can turn there in your Bibles, or if you're on YouVersion Live, you'll have it pop up, and it'll probably even be behind my head here as we read. But Psalm 100, let me just read it to you and then make a few points. Shout with joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness and come before Him singing with joy. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us and we are His. We are His people, the sheep of His pasture. Enter His gates with thanksgiving. Go into His courts with praise. Give thanks to Him and praise His name. For the Lord is good, His unfailing love continues forever, and His faithfulness continues to each generation. I want to make 3 points that come out of these 5 verses here today as we talk through this and talk about having a thankful life. The first point is this: thankfulness should be all inclusive. Thankfulness should be all inclusive. It says, shout with joy to the Lord, all the earth. All of the earth. You see, one of the things that is interesting to me is I believe sometimes we mix up what we're thankful for with who we're thankful to. Or at least what we're thankful for with who we should be thankful to. One of the struggles that we have, and I struggle with this and wrestle with this, is sometimes we get in the mentality that we're the end stop. In other words, we say to our children, you better be thankful for mom and dad. And we teach them that we're the end stop, that we're the top of the food chain, so to speak. And the reality is we are not. The reality is God is the top of the Thanksgiving chain. But so many times we get locked in to being thankful for people on this earth, or being thankful to people on this earth. And the reality is that God created every single one of us. He created your annoying neighbor. He created your obnoxious boss. He created you. He created your children that you love sometimes and that you really bear with others. I mean, He created all of us. And so literally all of us are called to be thankful, not necessarily to each other, but to be thankful to God for each other. And sometimes we miss that, and sometimes I believe we get that out of priority, and we get that out of kilter. God has offered to you and I, to each of us, this opportunity to have a personal relationship with Him through Jesus Christ. Through what Jesus Christ did on the cross, it was because God sent His Son that He offered to you and to I this salvation, this forgiveness, this love that He has for us. And so it's inclusive for all of the world that we should be thankful and praise to God. The second thing it teaches us in these verses is that knowledge leads to thanksgiving. Knowledge leads to thanksgiving. He says, worship the Lord with gladness and come before Him singing with joy. Look at verse 3. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us and we are His. We are His people, the sheep of His pasture. Knowledge leads to thanksgiving. And there's no better way I could put this than to say I'm a 47-year-old father of 2 teenage boys. When I was a teenager, I was a little bit of a pill. Now, I wasn't a bad kid, okay? There was only once, I think the principal called home, and that my dad had given me permission to do what I'd gotten in trouble for, so he was like cool with that. The police never brought me home from anything. I don't think they ever called my parents. I maybe got a speeding ticket, at one point. I wasn't a bad kid, but when I was a teenager, I did have a mentality that sort of said, you need to do this for me. I did have sort of a mentality that said, Mom and Dad, I'm 16. I should be getting a car. And when I get it, I would expect you to put gas in it and take care of it and do anything else. I mean, I just sort of had that teenager mentality a lot of teenagers have. And it wasn't that I was a bad kid, but when I was in my 20s, as I grew up, I began to think this thought. Maybe you had this same thought. I'm going to get everything bigger, better, and quicker than my parents got it. I'm going to get a home quicker than my parents got a home. It's going to be bigger than my parents' home. In fact, all the stuff I'm going to get is going to be better. I'm not going to have the old microwave. I'm getting a new microwave. I'm not going to have the old furniture. I'm getting new furniture in my new house. And that's the mentality I had in my 20s. And in my 30s, I sort of began to come to a realization that life is hard. And it doesn't take a day off. It doesn't honor the Sabbath. It doesn't rest on the Sabbath. Life doesn't stop when it gets hard for me. Life doesn't just go, oh, is that too much? Let me just ease up. The creditors don't stop calling just because, they feel bad for you. And I realized in my 30s that life was hard and that life wasn't necessarily changing. And life wasn't necessarily getting easier. And now in my 40s, let me just tell you, I've come to understand more and understand better everything my parents ever did for me. I began to understand. In fact, now when I send them a birthday card, it used to just be the love you, Rick. Now, I'm filling up the whole page with just thank you for this and thank you for that. And what has happened is I've become to understand, because now I'm having to do some of the same things for my children. I'm coming to understand what that really means. And I really understand more now the sacrifice that my parents made for me. Even though when I was a teenager, I didn't see it. In fact, I would be angry that they couldn't do more for me or give me more, buy me better this or get me better that. But at 47 years old, I've become aware. I've gained the knowledge of what it takes to raise a teenager or a child, either one. And so knowledge brings with it thanksgiving. Verse 3 says, He made us, we are His. That knowledge should lead us to thanksgiving. Because He made us. He created us. And the Bible tells us He formed us in our mother's womb. The Bible tells us He knows our first day from our last day. The Bible tells us He knows the numbers of hairs on your head. The Bible tells us that He works everything together for your good. The Bible tells us that He watches over you as He does the sparrow. That knowledge should bring us to a place of thanksgiving. And a place of thankfulness and living a thankful life. I have down here, so often we think and we live like that all I have, I got, and it's all for me, about me, and focused on me. And I know some people who live in that world. They think that the world revolves around them. They think that the world is about them. And they think that the world is for their glory and their acknowledgement. Yet the reality of the knowledge that we know as believers is that all glory is for God. Our life is to be a light for His glory, not our own. Our life is supposed to be lived to point people to Him, not to us. Knowledge leads to thanksgiving. Listen to Colossians chapter 3. It says, since God chose you to be the holy people He loves, you must clothe yourself with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Above all, clothe yourself with love, which binds us all together in perfect harmony. And let the peace that comes from Christ rule in your hearts. For as members of one body you are called to live in peace and always be thankful. Let the message about Christ and all its richness fill your lives. Teach and counsel each other with all the wisdom He gives. Sing songs and hymns and spiritual songs to God with thankful hearts. And whatever you do or say, do it as a representative of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks through Him to God the Father. Knowledge brings thanksgiving. And the final thing we see in Psalm 100 is that forever is a very long time. Verse 5 says, "The Lord is good, and His unfailing love, continues forever, and His faithfulness continues to each generation." Forever is a really long time. We sang it, "Your love never fails." In fact, I think those words are in that song. And His love never fails, even in the midst of betrayal. His love never fails. Even in the midst of our wayward hearts, His love doesn't fail. Even in the midst of your trial and your circumstance and your trouble that you're in, His love does not fail. And it endures forever. And that's a very, very long time. His love does not change for us. I want to give you just sort of it's not a thankfulness quiz, but it's just some sort of, here's some keys that you can sort of look at your life and figure out where you are on that thankful meter that we saw earlier. Because when we're not thankful, one of the things that happens is we become greedy. When we're not thankful, we become greedy. Well, we become this mindset and this attitude that we're going to get it all for us. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be the donuts in the back. It could be the juice. It could be money. It could be status. It could be the promotion. But we become greedy when we're not thankful. However, when we are thankful, we become giving. Instead of trying to get it all for us, we begin to give to others. When we're not thankful, we become stingy. Not only do we try to get it all, but we try to keep it all for us. We become stingy when we're not thankful people. But when we're thankful, we become generous. Not only do we give, but we give generously. There was a guy on Facebook. I'm not exactly sure. I think a church sort of did this, but I don't know. But there was a guy on Facebook, and some of you are friends with him, and you may have saw this post. But he was sitting, I think it was Friday night, up at Starbucks with a stack of Starbucks gift cards. And he was just sitting there waiting to give people a gift card as they came in to get coffee. I think he had $100 worth of gift cards. And he was just sitting there, and he took a picture, had a computer set up and a little book to read at Starbucks, and had a stack of gift cards that he had gotten. And he was just sitting there waiting to give people a gift card as they came in. Saw a status of a guy who was in a drive-thru. It was pretty cool how he did this. He was doing the whole pay it forward, where like the person in front of you buys your meal or whatever. You've heard of people doing that. But what was really cool is he took a picture in his rearview mirror of the car that was behind him. So it was flipped once, twice, you know how invert things. And so he took a picture of, hope they enjoy their meal. That's what it means to be generous and to be giving. And you can't do that if you're not thankful. If you're not thankful, you become greedy and stingy. But when you're thankful, you become giving and very generous. When you're not thankful, you focus only on what you see. When you're not thankful, you focus only on what you see. Yet when you are thankful, you can focus on what we don't see. When we're not thankful, we focus on what we don't have, versus when we are very thankful, we focus on what we do have. When we're not thankful, we focus on the things that we don't have. I don't have a new car. I don't have this. I don't have that. That's what happens when we're not thankful people. And yet when we live a thankful life, we don't focus on what we don't have. We focus on what we do have. When we're not thankful, we become self-centered, while when we're thankful, we become others-centered. Sometimes it's hard in church life. In fact, one of the things I'm trying to gather up now is just really a number of how many people serve in our church. And just, there's some people that serve multiple times a month. There's some people who serve in multiple ministries. And there's people who serve regularly. But sometimes it's hard to get people to serve because people don't want to focus on others. We want to come and we want to sit and we want to consume and we want to enjoy the music and we want to enjoy the band and we just want to be consumers instead of being thankful and being other-centered. When we're not thankful, we live in a what next world because we're never satisfied with what we have. If you get the iPhone 6 and you're not a very thankful person, you'll be saying, when's the 7 coming out? You have an iPad. I have an iPad. Guess what? There's 3 more models that have been out since I got this one. Well, we're not very thankful. What's next? I just need hey, I got the 2013 car. I just need the 2014. That's what happens when we're not thankful. We just look for what's next because we're never satisfied. And yet when we're thankful, we live in for the moment world. Like today, I'm very grateful for the fact that I had enough money to go to the laundromat to do my laundry because my washer's broke again. Now, the people at the washing machine company are very grateful for the fact that my washing machine keeps breaking down. In fact, my service guy is probably getting a Christmas bonus. It's all going to work out great for him. But I could say I don't have a washing machine, or I could say I had the money to go to the laundromat to get my laundry done. It's all in what are we living for this moment. And as we're thankful, we can be grateful for the things that we have and the things that are here and the things that are of today. Ephesians 5:20, a couple verses to close. Ephesians 5:20 says, and give thanks for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now here's what strikes me about that verse, and it's in the very next verse I'm going to read. Here's what strikes me about that. He says, give thanks for everything. There are some things that have happened this week that I found it hard to give thanks for. There are some things that have happened, some things I've had to deal with, some issues, some situations that I find it hard to be thankful for. I don't know, maybe that's your struggle too. Maybe things aren't going your way today, or maybe this has been a rough week, or maybe the home life isn't sweet and smells like cinnamon, and maybe the marriage just isn't all that it should be, and maybe your kids just aren't doing everything the way you want them to. Maybe, I don't know what your struggle is here today, but he says, give thanks in everything. 1 Thessalonians 5:18, it says, again, be thankful in all circumstances. And here's why. Get this. For this is God's will for you who belong to Christ Jesus. This Thanksgiving week, this Thanksgiving holiday, these next 4 days are going to fly by quicker than you know. But can I tell you that there's 51 other weeks out of the year that we could live a thankful life. There are 364 other days throughout the course of the year other than the 4th Thursday of November that you can choose to be thankful and to live a thankful life. And here's the amazing part about it. It's all your choice. It literally is one of the few things in life that you have complete control over, whether or not you choose to be thankful or whether you choose not to be thankful. It rests in our lap. The choice is ours today. Will you choose to live a thankful life? Will you choose to understand today and this week even that while you are thankful maybe for your family, that you really are thankful to God? And there's a big difference there. We need to realize that the things that we are thankful for versus the one that we should be thankful to in Jesus Christ and to God the Father. Let's pray.